Little boy gives his only meal to a stray dog, not knowing it was a CEO's missing best friend. Imagine that for a moment, a child with barely enough to eat, choosing to give away his only meal, not out of plenty, but out of pure selflessness. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching this from right now? Drop it in the comments, because it's incredible to see how kindness connects people from every corner of the world. Now, let's step into Henry's story and witness how a single act of compassion set everything into motion. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind of afternoon where the world feels heavy and silence carries the weight of 1,000 untold stories. Under the shade of an old tree, a boy sat cross-legged, holding the only food he had managed to bring from home, a small piece of bread, no bigger than his palm. His name was Henry, a child with tired eyes, patched up clothes, and a stomach that often went to bed empty. But today, something was different. From the corner of his eye, Henry noticed movement, a fragile shape lingering just a few steps away. A stray dog, thin, trembling, with fur matted by dirt and days of hunger. The dog's eyes told a story without words. They were hollow, desperate, yet still filled with a kind of pleading hope. And for a long moment, boy and dog simply stared at one another. Henry's stomach growled. His fingers clutched the bread tighter, almost as if his own body was reminding him of its need. But then he looked again at those sad eyes. Slowly, very slowly, he broke the bread in half. Then, with a deep breath, he pushed the entire meal forward, not keeping a single bite for himself. The dog hesitated at first, sniffing, almost afraid this gift wasn't real. And then, in a burst of need, it devoured the bread, wagging its tail weakly as though thanking him with every bite. Henry smiled, not because he was full, but because for the first time in a long while, someone else was. Little did he know, this one selfless act, this moment under the tree, was the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever. Henry's life had never been easy. Every morning, before the sun even rose, he would wake up in a tiny wooden shack on the edge of town. The walls were thin, the roof leaked when it rained, and the cold seemed to slip in no matter how tightly the blankets were pulled. His mother worked long hours, scrubbing floors, washing dishes in other people's homes, just to keep food on the table. But still, most days, there wasn't enough. At school, Henry's classmates carried shiny lunchboxes filled with sandwiches, fruit, and snacks. He carried nothing but silence. Sometimes a crust of bread, sometimes nothing at all. And when lunchtime came, he would quietly step away, sitting under that same tree, hiding his hunger so no one would see. His shoes were worn thin, the soles nearly gone. Every step home was a reminder of how much they lacked. Yet, Henry never complained. Instead, he carried a strange kind of strength for someone so young, a heart that noticed kindness, even in the smallest of places. When others looked at him and saw only a poor boy, Henry looked at the world and searched for reasons to hope. But deep inside, he was lonely in ways words could never capture. His father had left years ago, and though his mother did her best, Henry often felt invisible, like a small shadow moving through a world that had no place for him. And maybe that's why, when he saw the stray dog for the first time, it felt almost like looking into a mirror. Two souls unwanted, two souls forgotten, two souls, both starving but still clinging to life. Henry had very little to give, but even in his poverty, his heart was richer than most. And soon, that heart would lead him into a bond stronger than hunger, stronger than loneliness, a bond that would rewrite his story forever. The first time Henry truly gave was a moment so small, yet so powerful, it would echo far beyond what he could imagine. It was late afternoon. The sun hung low, painting the sky with fading streaks of orange. Henry sat beneath the old tree, holding his meager lunch, just a small piece of bread, cracked and dry at the edges. It was all he had. His stomach tightened with hunger, growling louder than he wanted to admit. He lifted the bread, ready to take a bite, when he noticed those eyes again. The strayed dog stood a few steps away, its frame thin, ribs pressing against fragile skin. It stared, not moving closer, but not looking away either, as if asking without words, "Please." Henry hesitated. For a moment, the boy inside him fought the man he was forced to become. He was hungry, weak. He needed this food. But then something shifted. He looked at the dog, trembling, tail barely wagging with hope. And suddenly, Henry didn't see just a stray. He saw himself. Quietly, he broke the bread in half. He stared at it for a long moment. Then, with a deep breath, he pushed both pieces toward the dog. The dog froze, uncertain if this was real. But hunger knows no fear. In an instant, it darted forward, snatching the bread with desperate jaws. Each bite was fast, almost frantic, as though the food might vanish if it didn't eat quickly enough. Henry watched with a strange mix of pain and joy. His stomach ached, but his heart felt full. And as the last crumbs disappeared, the dog lifted its head, its eyes softer now, shining with something more than hunger, gratitude. The boy smiled, a small, tired smile, but real. And for the first time in a long while, Henry didn't feel so alone. Little did he know, that simple gift, that first act of kindness, was only the beginning of a friendship that would change everything. From that day on, the tree was no longer just a resting place. It became a meeting point, a quiet corner of the world where a boy and a dog, two forgotten souls, found each other again and again. Every afternoon, Henry would walk the same worn path from school, clutching whatever little food he had managed to carry. Sometimes it was a piece of bread, sometimes only scraps wrapped in paper, and on some days, nothing at all but a small tin cup of water. But no matter what he brought, the dog was always there, waiting, ears perking up, tail wagging weakly the moment it spotted him. Henry began to call him Buddy. The name slipped out one afternoon as naturally as if he had known it all along. And somehow, the dog seemed to understand. At the sound of his name, Buddy's eyes would light up and he would shuffle closer, as though answering, "Yes, I'm yours." Day after day, the ritual continued. Henry would sit under the tree, speaking in a soft voice, telling Buddy about his school day, about the bullies who pushed him around, about his mother working late into the night. Buddy never spoke back, of course, but his presence, his listening, was enough. In return, Buddy offered something Henry hadn't felt in a long time, companionship. He would nudge Henry's hand with his cold nose, curl up beside him, and sometimes even follow him all the way home, walking a few steps behind like a quiet guardian. Slowly, Henry noticed changes. Buddy was no longer trembling. His steps grew steadier. His fur, though still rough, began to shine just a little, and his tail, once lifeless, now wagged with excitement each time Henry arrived. It was as if Henry's kindness was feeding more than Buddy's body. It was feeding his spirit. And in turn, Buddy was giving something back to Henry too. Something the boy didn't even know he was missing. A friend. What began as a single act of sacrifice was becoming a bond. A bond that grew stronger with each passing day, binding boy and dog in a friendship that felt destined, as if life itself had planned their meeting. For Henry, loneliness had always been like a shadow. It followed him everywhere. In the classroom where he sat alone at the back, on the playground where laughter felt too far away, and on the long walk home through dusty streets where no one ever called his name. But now there was Buddy. Every afternoon, without fail, the dog would appear, sometimes waiting under the tree, sometimes trotting up the road to meet him halfway, as though he knew Henry needed him. And slowly, the silence that once weighed so heavily on Henry began to feel lighter. When bullies pushed him in the schoolyard, Buddy would bark from the fence, sending them scattering in fear. When Henry walked the lonely path home, Buddy padded quietly at his side, head low, eyes alert, as if guarding his small friend from a world that had given him so little. At night, when the ache of hunger gnawed at his stomach, and the empty chair at the table reminded him of his father who never came back, Henry found himself whispering his secrets to Buddy. Under the stars, in hushed tones, he spoke of his dreams, to be strong, to take care of his mother, to never let anyone feel as forgotten as he did. And though Buddy never answered, his warm eyes seemed to say everything Henry needed to hear. You're not alone. Not anymore. It was a strange, beautiful thing. How a boy with almost nothing could give love so freely, and how a stray, with nothing at all, could return it in ways words never could. In those quiet, fragile moments, Henry realized something he had never felt before. He finally had a friend. Not just a friend to share food with, but a friend to share life with. And that simple truth gave Henry a reason to keep going. To Henry, Buddy was simply a stray, a lost soul who had stumbled into his life, hungry and forgotten. But the truth was far more complicated. There were moments, small, fleeting moments, that Henry couldn't explain. Like the time Buddy perked up at the sound of a car engine, ears sharp, eyes fixed, as though waiting for someone familiar to step out. Or the way he barked fiercely when he heard a certain whistle from a distance, then whined softly, as if it stirred an old memory. Henry noticed, too, that Buddy wasn't like other strays. Yes, his fur was matted and his body frail, but beneath the dirt, there was something different. His coat had once been soft, well-groomed. Henry could feel it when he brushed his small hand along Buddy's back, and his collar, though long gone, had left a faint, worn mark around his neck. Sometimes, Buddy would sit perfectly still, staring out the horizon, as if searching for something or someone. His eyes, though full of love for Henry, carried a sadness that seemed far older than the streets he wandered. Henry couldn't know it then, but Buddy wasn't just a stray dog trying to survive. He was a missing piece of another life, a life of comfort, love, and belonging, a life that still searched for him. And though Henry couldn't see it yet, the day was coming when Buddy's hidden past would collide with his world, setting into motion a chain of events that neither boy nor dog could ever have imagined. Far from the dusty streets where Henry walked each day, another story was unfolding. Inside a towering glass building in the heart of the city, Michael Carter sat in his office, one of the most powerful men in the business world. His name commanded respect. His wealth could buy almost anything. And yet, in the quiet moments, when the noise of meetings and phone calls faded, Michael felt a hollow ache that no success could ever fill, because money could not replace what he had lost. 2 years earlier, Michael's constant companion, his dog Max, had gone missing. Max wasn't just a pet. He was family, a steady presence through late nights at the office, long drives home, and lonely dinners at an empty table. In a world where people often chased Michael's fortune instead of his heart, Max had been the one soul who loved him without condition. When Max disappeared, Michael searched tirelessly. He put up posters, hired search teams, even offered rewards. But days turned into weeks and weeks into years. And slowly, hope began to slip through his fingers. Still, he never gave up completely. Every time Michael saw a stray dog on the street, his chest tightened. For just a second, he would think, could it be him? But the answer was always the same. Another face, another disappointment. In the boardroom, Michael Carter was seen as untouchable. But behind closed doors, he was just a man who missed his best friend. And though he didn't know it yet, Max was alive. Not only alive, but being kept safe by a boy who had almost nothing to give, yet had given everything. 2 worlds, one of power, one of poverty, both longing for the same dog. And soon, fate would bring them together. The bond between Henry and Buddy was no longer just a friendship. It was survival. It was loyalty. It was love in its purest form. Day after day, Henry continued to share what little he had. Sometimes that meant skipping his own meal entirely. He would sit beneath the old tree, pretending he wasn't hungry, while pushing every crumb toward Buddy. And though his stomach twisted with pain, his heart felt lighter watching his friend eat. But Buddy was not only receiving, he was giving, too. One afternoon, as Henry walked home, a group of older boys spotted him. They shoved him, laughed at his torn shoes, mocked the emptiness of his lunch bag. Henry tried to stay quiet, tried to walk away, but the bullying grew harsher. Then, from nowhere, Buddy charged forward, fur bristling, teeth bared, barking with a strength that made the bullies scatter in fear. They ran off, leaving Henry shaken, but safe. Henry dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around Buddy's neck. Tears stung his eyes as he whispered, "Thank you, you're all I have." And Buddy seemed to understand. He pressed his head into Henry's chest, as if to say, "And I'll never leave you." From that day on, Henry no longer saw Buddy as a stray he had saved. He saw him as family, a protector, a brother in a world that had given him so little. What Henry didn't know was that the bond he had built was about to be tested, because fate was already moving pieces in the background, pieces that would soon bring him face to face with a truth far bigger than either boy or dog could imagine. It happened on a day like any other. Henry walked home from school, his small figure moving along the dusty road, Buddy trotting faithfully at his side. The sun dipped low, stretching shadows across the street. To Henry, it felt like just another ordinary afternoon. But destiny rarely announces itself. It arrives quietly, then changes everything. As they turned a corner, a sleek black car slowed to a stop nearby. Inside sat Michael Carter. Another long day at the office, another drive home to the city he owned but could never truly feel home in. He wasn't looking for anything, and yet his gaze drifted toward the sidewalk. At first, it was nothing more than a fleeting glance. A boy, barefoot and thin, walking with a dog. But then, Michael's breath caught. His hand froze on the steering wheel. The dog, the way he moved, the markings on his fur, the familiar tilt of his head. It couldn't be. Michael rolled down the window, his voice trembling as he whispered a name he hadn't spoken aloud in years. "Max!" The dog stopped, turned, and in that instant, the world seemed to stand still. Buddy's ears perked, his eyes widened, tail froze in midair. Then, without hesitation, he bolted toward the car, leaping against the door, barking, whining, his whole body trembling with recognition. Henry stood frozen, confusion written across his face. He had never seen Buddy react like this. So wild, so desperate, so alive. Michael stepped out, falling to his knees as the dog rushed into his arms. Tears welled in the CEO's eyes as he buried his face in the fur he thought he had lost forever. "Max, you're home." For Michael, it was a miracle. For Henry, it was the beginning of heartbreak. Because in that single moment, the dog he had called Buddy, the only friend he had in the world, suddenly belonged to someone else. The street was quiet, yet Henry's world felt louder than ever. He watched his buddy, wag his tail furiously, leaping into the arms of the stranger who had stepped out of the car. The dog licked his face, whined, barked, and pressed against him with a joy Henry had never seen before. Michael Carter's eyes were wet, his hands clutching the dog as if afraid he might vanish again. "Max, my boy, I thought I lost you forever," he whispered, his voice breaking. Henry stood frozen, his heart aching in a way he couldn't explain. Buddy? Max? Which was it? For weeks, months, this dog had been his only friend, his protector, his family. And now he wasn't just a stray. He was someone else's. Michael looked up, finally noticing the thin boy standing a few steps away. The torn clothes, the empty lunch bag dangling at his side. And then the understanding began to dawn. "You've been taking care of him, haven't you?" Michael's voice was soft, almost reverent. Henry swallowed hard, his lips trembling as he nodded. I didn't know he belonged to anyone. He was hungry. I just wanted to help." Michael's chest tightened. A boy with nothing had kept his best friend alive. Day after day, with scraps of food he could barely afford to spare. Henry lowered his gaze, blinking back the sting in his eyes. "His name is Buddy," he whispered, as if the word itself carried every memory they had built together. And for a long, quiet moment, Michael didn't know what to say, because standing before him was not just a boy and a stray. It was the story of a child's sacrifice, a heart far bigger than his hunger, and a friendship so pure it had bridged worlds. But for Henry, the truth cut deep. The friend he thought was his had never truly belonged to him at all. And yet, what Henry didn't know was that his kindness had not gone unnoticed. It had stirred something inside a man who had forgotten what real generosity looked like. And that truth was about to change his life forever. Michael Carter had built an empire, but in that moment, standing on a quiet street with tears in his eyes, he realized the greatest wealth he had ever stumbled upon was kindness. He looked at Henry, this small boy with hollow cheeks and shoes that barely held together. A boy who had chosen hunger, just so a dog could eat. Slowly, Michael stood, keeping one hand on Max, on Buddy, and the other reaching toward Henry. "What you've done," he said softly, "most grown men wouldn't. You gave him life when you had almost nothing." Henry shifted uncomfortably, his eyes cast downward. He wasn't used to being seen. He wasn't used to being praised. "I didn't do anything special," he whispered. "He was just my friend." Michael's heart ached at those words. This boy didn't even realize the depth of his own sacrifice. And in that instant, a decision settled in his chest. Firm, unshakable. He would not let Henry's kindness go unanswered. That very evening, Michael visited Henry's home, the shack with its leaking roof, the weary mother who greeted him with tired eyes and work-worn hands. She froze when she realized who stood at her door. This man whose face appeared on magazines, now humbly stepping into her broken world. Michael didn't come with pity. He came with gratitude, with respect, and with a promise that Henry and his mother would never go hungry again. Food filled the table. Clothes replaced the tattered fabric Henry had worn for years. And beyond that, opportunity. School fees paid. A future carved where there had only been struggle. For the first time in his life, Henry saw his mother smile, without the weight of worry pressing it down. And for the first time, he dared to believe that maybe kindness really could come back to you. Max, Buddy, lay at Henry's feet that night, tail thumping against the floor, as if to remind him, this bond would never be broken. Not by names, not by circumstance, not even by fate. Because in giving away his only meal, Henry had gained something far greater. A family. The days that followed were unlike anything Henry had ever known. The empty shelves in his home were now filled with food. The cracked shoes he once walked in were replaced with sturdy ones that carried him proudly to school. And for the first time, Henry studied with a full stomach, his mind free from the constant ache of hunger. But more than the material changes, something deeper had shifted. Henry no longer felt invisible, no longer felt forgotten, because someone had seen his sacrifice and chosen to honor it. Michael Carter kept his word. He visited often, not as a distant CO, but as a friend. He brought warmth, opportunity, and support, not to erase Henry's past, but to help him build a future. And Max, Buddy, remained a bridge between them. Though he had once belonged to Michael, he was now shared. A dog with two names and two families who loved him. Each wag of his tail was a reminder that compassion has no boundaries. Henry would often sit by the tree where it had all begun, the place where a boy once gave away his only meal. And now, as he looked at Buddy resting beside him, he realized something powerful. What you give in love always finds its way back to you, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes in ways that can change your life forever. This story is not just about a boy and a dog. It's about kindness. It's about sacrifice. It's about the truth that no act of love, no matter how small, is ever wasted. So, the next time life asks you to choose between holding on to what little you have or giving it away, remember Henry, remember Buddy, and remember how one boy's selflessness rewrote his story. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness is the one that changes everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV, where every story is a reminder that kindness still matters and love always finds a way.